From the New York Times, I'm Zolan Kano-Youngs, filling in as host. This is The Daily. In the 2 years since a masked man shot and killed a healthcare executive, the national spotlight has turned to one primary suspect, Luigi Mangione.
Newly released video of the moment, prosecutors say Luigi Mangione gunned down United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson.
In that notebook, though, apparently there's multiple notes, writings from Mangione, as well as other notes.
Mounting evidence collected by investigators continue to link 26-year-old Luigi Mangione to the murder.
The overwhelming evidence has pointed to his guilt, and the question on most minds has been, what might the defense of one of the most famous murder suspects in America look like?
A lot of anticipation and a line of people outside federal court in New York City today.
On Friday, in a single hearing, we got our first glimpse at an answer, one that appears to include a full-throated embrace of his guilt. Today, my colleagues Benjamin Weiser and Hurubie Meko on the risky defense strategy of Luigi Mangione, and why an admission of guilt might be his best bet. It's Monday, August 17th. So Hurubie and Ben, you two have been following the prosecution of Luigi Mangione for almost 2 years. This has been happening on a number of different fronts. I think it's overwhelming for many people. Mangione faces multiple charges for multiple different crimes in both state and federal court, all centered around one act, the assassination of Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO. And on Friday, we got our first glimpse of how these different threads might play out in court. Ben, how would you characterize what we saw?
All of the pieces of this brazen assassination from back in December 2024, the killing on a Manhattan sidewalk that really riveted the nation, fell into place in front of our eyes. And we heard from Mangione for the very first time in public. When he pled guilty, he entered a guilty plea before a judge and explained what he had done that made him believe he was guilty.
A guilty plea. Hurubie, when I hear that, I kind of wonder, okay, is this a wrap? Is it over? Is that the case?
Not quite. So he's entered a guilty plea in the federal case, but he still has a state case that is still looming, and there could be months of litigation on that front. So the case is far from over. Far from over.
Okay, let's get into this. Let's talk through the different elements of the state case, the federal case, all of these cases against Luigi Mangione. How has his legal defense evolved from the moment of his arrest?
Sure. So from his arrest in Altoona, Pennsylvania, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office almost immediately charged him with 11 counts, including terrorism and second-degree murder. And as he was being extradited to New York, and as he landed in New York City, the Manhattan federal prosecutors announced that they, too, would be charging him.
The United States Justice Department brought 4 counts. Notably, one was use of a firearm to commit murder, which carries a maximum potential sentence of death if the government decides to seek it. There were also 2 counts of interstate stalking, in a sense, stalking him over state lines, stalking the victim, resulting in the death of Thompson. And that carried a maximum sentence of life. There was an additional firearm charge, but those were the 4 counts initially brought by the federal government. And in announcing those charges, the United States attorney at the time, this was the Biden administration, said explicitly that they expected the Manhattan DA's office to try Mangione first, and that the United States Attorney's Office would follow.
So the feds are deferring to the state authorities in some way. They're saying you're going to be kind of the lead on this and take the first crack at it.
That's right. But several months after Trump was elected and took office, the Attorney General at the time, Pam Bondi, announced that the administration was going to seek the death penalty. So once the feds were saying that, and at least appearing to accelerate the process, it was no longer clear that the federal government was going to defer to the state first, to the district attorney's office. I should add that there's always been a natural competitiveness between these two offices. It certainly goes back several decades the period of time I've been covering the subject. But on top of that, there's something else between the two offices. The U.S. Attorney's Office, of course, is part of the Justice Department under President Trump. And the district attorney is Alvin Bragg. And Alvin Bragg, of course, was the prosecutor whose office successfully prosecuted Donald Trump in 2024.
Right. And I mean, even just covering the White House, it is clear that there's no shortage of reasons why these two offices have tension.
And I should add that both prosecutors' offices have said that they're pulling from the same well of evidence, and that evidence, they've said from the beginning, is overwhelming. Starting with, at the scene, there were shell casings found from the gun. And at the time of Mangione's arrest as well, in a backpack, prosecutors have said there was a whole lot of evidence with the gun itself, as well as a notebook where they said that he planned the attack. And there was also a note with him that they've called a manifesto, which seemed to decry the healthcare insurance industry and essentially just spell out why he attacked and killed a health insurance executive.
Right. Not to mention the evidence that the whole world saw, these videos of the shooting that went viral and very much marked this killing. So, Ben, tell us about how Mangione's defense team set out to navigate all of these charges, supported by all of this evidence that, feels pretty overwhelming.
He certainly hired powerful lawyers who have a wealth of experience in New York, both as prosecutors and defense lawyers. His lead lawyer, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, herself had worked in the Manhattan's DA's office as the number 2 prosecutor there. And her husband, Mark Agnifilo, represented some of the most prominent defendants in the city just in the last year or so. Sean Combs, Diddy, in his trial.
That's a big case.
So their challenge, once Mr. Mangione was in custody, was first to attack the charges. And through filings in both the state and federal court and a lot of vigorous argument, they ultimately succeeded in getting the state terrorism charge against him dropped, and the federal count that carried the potential death penalty was also dismissed.
So it seems like they got some momentum.
Absolutely. They still faced another great challenge, though. All of that evidence that had been collected and tied by prosecutors to Mangione was out there. And that was the evidence that would be presented against him in any trial he faced in New York, a state or federal court. And so they filed motions in both courts to suppress the evidence.
I just wanted to jump in very quickly. The suppression of the evidence and the defense lawyers' arguments are really pointed to the time that Mangione was arrested in Pennsylvania. They argue that when the Altoona Police Department searched his backpack, at first there was no warrant. So everything that was pulled out should not have been pulled out of the backpack, that violated his rights. And essentially they make a fruit of the poison tree argument and say that therefore anything that was in that backpack should not be allowed into a trial at all. And they tried that both in the federal and state case. In the federal case, the judge overseeing that one quickly ruled that actually under federal law, everything is allowed into a trial. And in the state case, the judge decided that some evidence should be suppressed, but allowed in 2 very important pieces of evidence for state prosecutors, which was the gun that they said was connected to the killing and a notebook that they say detailed his plans to kill Brian Thompson.
Okay, so essentially this effort to suppress the evidence, it doesn't really work. Where does the defense team go from there?
So the question after that became, are they having any kinds of plea negotiations with the prosecutors? And just generally, any good defense lawyer would always be in talks with prosecutors throughout the case.
This would be essentially a deal for Mangione to plead guilty on a lesser charge for a lesser sentence. Is that right?
It could be the same charge. It could be a lesser charge, but it would be an effort for Mangione and his team to mitigate either the charges that he's facing or the sentence that he could possibly face. But there was no public evidence, at least on the state side, that there had been any kinds of negotiations or any talks. On the contrary, state prosecutors had been very vocal that they wanted to go to trial. They felt they had a very strong case, and the state trial was fast approaching. There was a hearing on Tuesday where the state judge announced that the jury would be anonymous, and he told everyone, "I will see you on September 8th."
Okay, so after that, it looks like Mangione is going to have to go to court and defend himself against murder charges pretty soon.
That's right. And then on a day last week, the same day that the judge in the state court held his final hearing before the trial, the federal court posted a notice saying that a hearing was being scheduled for Friday morning for reasons that were not described. And that brought us to a federal courtroom on Friday where Mangione made his appearance.
And what did we see in that federal courtroom on Friday?
Well, Mangione sat there between his lawyers and gave what's called an allocution, a statement in which he admitted to what he did that added up to guilt in this case, the 2 stalking charges that led to Mr. Thompson's death. He talked about learning that United Healthcare was holding an annual investor conference in New York City. He researched the event online, and he said he emailed United Healthcare leadership posing as an investor at a firm that he said was managing over $50 billion in assets and asking for more information about the conference. And he said, and this is a direct quote, "Unlike my previous interactions with insurers, I received an immediate response within an hour," end quote, suggesting against that they were happy to respond to a wealthy investor, even if they, in his perspective, weren't treating their patients very well. He also mentioned that he had endured years of severe pain from what he said was a broken back, and that he had had to navigate the obstacles of the health insurance system. So here he is making clear statements about his opinions that might also suggest his motivation. He talked about using a 3D printer to make part of a gun, which he equipped with a silencer and a magazine. And he also talked about traveling from outside New York to Manhattan to carry out this assassination. And he said, "My travel to New York and my email to United Healthcare was with the intent to shoot Brian Thompson."
This is the first time we have Mangione or his team addressing any of this, right? I mean, we haven't heard from him in this kind of way yet until this moment, no?
That's right. And then this allocution culminated with his statement that on the morning of December 4, 2024, and again, I'm quoting him, "I shot Mr. Thompson in Manhattan and he died. When I did so, I understood that my actions would place him in fear of death and serious bodily injury. I knew what I was doing was illegal," end quote.
So, Hurubie, as I hear these details, all of these seem like details that would hurt Mangione's case. It almost seems like he could just be burning the house down here as he admits this guilt. What were your reactions to what he was saying in court that day?
My first thought, especially as he started reading from a prepared statement and giving all of these details, is it's remarkable to have all of this information after nearly 2 years, to hear from him why he killed Brian Thompson and the details of the planning and everything that he gave. And my immediate second thought is that far from burning down the house, that this was a strategic move from Mangione and his lawyers to upend the state case. Because as we were paying attention to the words that he was saying in that courtroom, so were the prosecutors with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office just down the street.
We'll be right back. Okay, so Hurubie, help me understand why Mangione's lawyers would offer this blunt, detailed admission of guilt in this way. On first glance, it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't track, but I'm sure you've got a better understanding than me on this.
We don't know exactly what the discussions were between Mangione and his lawyers. However, what we do know is within an hour of his plea, his lawyers file a motion in state court making 2 arguments. One, they say there are due process violations. And the second piece, they argue that now that Mangione has pleaded guilty to federal charges, that now this is essentially a double jeopardy case in the state venue, and the state case should be tossed out.
Okay, double jeopardy. If I have this right, we're essentially talking about the argument that somebody cannot be tried twice for the same crime. But hearing you guys talk about this, I thought that we had different charges here, that each of these entities, state and feds, they're bringing different charges. So how does double jeopardy apply here?
That's likely what the Manhattan District Attorney's Office is going to argue against this motion to dismiss, is that the federal case and the state case are designed to address different harms, where it's the stalking charges in the federal case, and the state case is very different because he's actually being tried for murder.
Right, different institutions, different charges.
Right. But New York state law has broader protections for defendants.
Interesting.
What Mangione's lawyers are arguing under state law is the fact that he's already pleaded guilty to stalking, which led to Brian Thompson's death, that the state case is automatically double jeopardied out.
Right. And so that detailed confession he gave, I imagine that was actually key to this argument.
That's correct. It could become very key.
But Ben, clarify something for me here. What does Mangione actually have to gain in this situation? Right? You guys have articulated the strategy, but if he does this, he's still going to be convicted in federal court, right? So what is the benefit of his lawyers directing him to follow this route, this strategy?
Well, of course, he has been convicted now, and thus we know he faces up to life in prison, and under the guidelines could face less time. Perhaps less time that would allow him, if he was sentenced to less time, to walk out of prison before he was 60 years old. And the truth is, in state court, if he were convicted there, he faces a 25 years to life sentence on a second-degree murder charge, which, again, in a theoretical sense, would allow him to walk out of prison as well. But the bottom line is that by pleading guilty as he has, he at least has a chance, you would think, or his lawyers think, to get rid of that state case altogether. It's a better deal for them to only be facing one sentence than two.
Got it. Okay. So it may be that the feds aren't more lenient than the state prosecutors, but that's actually besides the point. The strategy here is more so that by Luigi Mangione bending the knee on one track here, he actually may have a higher chance of eliminating that second track, meaning that he could face an outcome where he only needs to deal with one trial.
Right. And he could, if he's very lucky, get a sentence that would allow him to walk out of prison. But he has to be very lucky that there's no state case at all.
Just to jump in very quickly, if his strategy doesn't work and a state trial does go forward, everything he has said during that hearing, his admission, all of that could be admissible in a trial against him. So on some level, it is a risky maneuver.
Okay, so it seems like this detailed admission of guilt we got from Mangione, I understand how it plays into this double jeopardy strategy. But, I also wonder how it might play into something broader. In the minds of some, Luigi Mangione had become something bigger. He had become this idol for standing up against the healthcare insurance industry. So, Hurubie, I wonder if you've examined not only how his admission of guilt and really his detailed explanation of his motive, not only how that factored into his legal strategy, but also how that factors into the broader cultural conversation around this case.
Well, it might be the first time that we've heard Luigi Mangione admit to the killing in this case. For some of his supporters, they've just understood that it was him and that they were supporting him because they saw his action as the actions of a vigilante or someone that was standing up to this bigger, larger force, which is the healthcare insurance industry and the harms that has been doing to the average American. So I don't think it's as shocking or surprising or turning away some of his most ardent supporters.
It's interesting, though, given what Mangione said in court, the government responded to it afterwards.
Just a few moments ago, Mangione pled guilty to his heinous act. This was not a spontaneous act of violence. It was deliberate, calculated, and premeditated.
Jamie McDonald, who has just been named the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, went outside with other law enforcement officials and spoke to the press. And he addressed the larger cultural conversation that this case had provoked.
The defendant committed this murder in an attempt to draw public attention to his dislike of certain businesses. But we live in a civilized society governed by the rule of law.
He essentially said there's nothing honorable about this. This is, an assassination we're talking about.
No grievance, political belief, or ideological cause can ever justify murder.
He said, we don't commit murder just because of political grievance or ideological causes.
There can be no celebrity in assassination. Any person who celebrates, encourages, or excuses actions like these is fundamentally wrong.
I know as beat reporters that we never want to lean into predictions in this business, but I do want to ask where things go next in this case and what we can expect the outcome of Mangione's risky move to be here.
Well, for sure, one thing that's coming in December is his sentencing. Mangione will appear before the judge in the federal case. And one aspect of the sentencing that I believe we can expect is that the family of the victim, Mr. Thompson's family, will be given the opportunity to speak and talk about the impact on them that his death has had. And of course, Mangione will be given an opportunity to speak. Not every defendant speaks at sentencing, but most do. And given what he said and his plea, it will be interesting to see how far he goes in whatever he says, if he says anything, before the judge imposes sentence.
On the state side, the district attorney's office has said that they would litigate that motion to dismiss filed by Mangione's lawyers, and it could really turn into months of court hearings, filings back and forth, and litigation. So this case is not over.
Ben, Hurubie, thank you so much for breaking it all down.
Thank you, Zolan.
Thank you for having us, Zolan.
We'll be right back. Here's what else you need to know today.
Can you pledge that the Justice Department will always act independently of the White House?
Well, there's a big difference between saying we will always do our job and investigate any case and act independently of the White House. No, I'm not going to pledge that, and no attorney general should ever pledge that.
On Sunday, Todd Blanche, President Trump's newly confirmed attorney general and former personal attorney, refused to say that he would always act independently of White House influence. Questions over Blanche's loyalty to Trump had nearly derailed his nomination to lead the Justice Department. But Blanche told NBC's Meet the Press that Trump had never asked him to do anything illegal or unethical. Blanche later said in an interview with Fox News that he was not afraid to push back against Trump.
If he and I have disagreements, or if there's something that he has questions about legally, that it's my job to talk to him about those issues, which I have done for many years, and I will continue to do, like we've done in Memphis.
And the head of U.S. Central Command responded to concerns raised about the USS Lincoln, an American aircraft carrier supporting U.S. operations against Iran. The ship has been deployed for nearly 9 months, with reports showing shortages of basic supplies, water contamination, and deteriorating mental health among the 5,000 sailors on the ship. President Trump has dismissed those concerns, but on Sunday, Admiral Brad Cooper acknowledged that long deployment at sea is, quote, uniquely challenging and tough. But he insisted that the ship has the lowest number of cases related to mental health among the Navy's 11 active aircraft carriers. Today's episode was produced by Alex Stern and Rochelle Bonja. It was edited by Michael Benoit and Rob Zipko, and contains music by Leah Shaw Dameron and Dan Powell. Our theme music is by Wonderly. This episode was engineered by Chris Wood. That's it for The Daily. I'm Zolan Kano Youngs. See you tomorrow.